News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis. Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
Welcome to Tool Talk Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning.
I'm Allan Gilbreth with darkoakmedia.com.
And I'm Maximilian. And isn't it funny when life just hands you a bone? And I'm going to say why. Because surprisingly, this is very relevant for today. I want to wish you all a very happy World Parrot Day.
Oh. Did you know that was coming, Max?
Nope.
Okay, well, that's very foreboding and very interesting you said that. So, World Parrot Day. And, you know, parrots, don't they live a long time? I thought that...
They live forever.
So you better... It's not like buying a puppy or something. You better be ready for about a 50-year
I think
relationship.
the record, Joe, is a sulfur-crested cockatoo that lived 120 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
That's like Flossie the cat, who's outlived like several of her owners already.
Yeah.
She's fixing to be 29, fixing to be 30 if she lives it past December. So good thing for Flossie.
Well, I'd love if anybody out there has got a pet parrot, I'd love to get a report on what they're, what
we accept audio.
Yeah, what that's like, or maybe have your parrot call the show or something. So okay,
just so long as it's FCC friendly. I've known FCC not friendly parrots.
Well,
that would be every parrot on the planet. I assure you.
Okay, very good, Max. Well, on that note, then, I guess I'll tee up this first, because in our Great Moments in Building History, it's very interesting. We're going to talk about really what I would call a masterpiece of nautical construction. It's the Kon-Tiki raft, built in 1947, and this was a masterpiece, and it worked. They built something that looks very simple, but, man, was it well engineered. And interestingly enough, they went on an expedition and they brought along a parrot. And we'll report what happens in that expedition. Okay.
Yeah, as you can tell, 2 out of 3 people in this room are parrot fans and 1 is not.
Right,
I never said anything about being a fan. I just kind of mentioned the day.
Yeah, okay. So we got that. We have a tool tale I hope we'll get to. I think woodworking is going to play a big role in the show today. That this has to do with woodworking. If I hope we have time to do that. In Allan's week in review, it looks pretty optimistic. I didn't see any nightmare scenarios. I didn't see anything.
I have that coming on Tuesday.
Oh, good. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
All right. But everything it looks like everything with this project, this building project, is going according to schedule. And you have some drywall cheats we're going to talk about.
Oh, big time.
And also, we're going to have a listener participation that will a listener participation / tool tale that we'll share momentarily. And of course, we got a lot more here on the list, but we're not going to tease all of it. But before we get to any of those things, let's get to our must-have item of the week, which I've already posted. I've already made the post that we need on our Facebook page. As a matter of fact, go to @ToolTalkRadio on Facebook, and you'll see this item. But okay, Allan, what am I holding up here?
That would be a framing square.
Yeah, I think people mostly know what a framing square is, but this one is the 12-inch by 8-inch framing square. And it even has metric on the backside, which you can see it's pretty worn out because I usually just use the inches one. But, what is a framing square? I mean, how far back are we talking?
It is a right angle.
It is. It looks like the letter L. If you don't know what it is, it's a solid piece of metal. Usually there's a hole somewhere so you can hang it up on your tool rack or something. But, Allan, this a framing square really does go back. I mean, you need a 90-degree angle.
We're in Egypt. Oh yeah.
And we've talked about this in the past. I think it's worth, since the framing square is pretty straightforward and we know what we need it for. It's holding it up onto that item and checking if you've got a 90-degree angle. But I've always said, in a pinch, you could make a framing square using string and rocks and a couple of pieces of maybe wood.
I have improvised one numerous times.
Like a plumb bob. I guess I just like the simplicity, but the idea that this could have been, we're talking Egyptians, probably further back than that, have used framing squares.
Use something similar, yes. It's just one of those things that it is ridiculously simple, but it makes your job and your project so much simpler.
Sure.
It's just a guide. It
Yeah.
just keeps you on track.
Well, and how many times have you been on a project where it's like, okay, before I even get started on this, you whip out the framing square. I'm thinking especially like if you're putting, I don't know, cabinets, or if you're going to be putting in flooring. Flooring's important.
Big time.
And you want to know how square the actual corners are where they're going to meet up, because this will save you a lot of room down the road. Like you don't want to just get in there, start putting down your
no.
subway flooring or something, because once you get to the corners that are not square, boy, are you going to notice it and everything. And this will even help you decide what flooring to pick out, So,
well, when you start looking at a project, and this is one of those, again, this is a very, very inexpensive tool. It is definitely on the cheap side, and they come in a wide variety of shapes and sizes, because you get them to do more than just a simple square. You can get bigger ones that are more ornate. However, the general idea is, what am I about to get into?
mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that is, and I'm working now on a spa, and one of the first things I did was grab my big one. I've got a 2 foot by 2 foot, corner square, framing square, and walk in and fling it into the corner to show everybody we weren't even close.
Yeah.
All right, let me tell you, move it. You're going to be a quarter of an inch further out from the wall on either wall than you think you're going to be.
Right.
Because we need a lot of forgiveness room, because this wall over here is doing the shimmy, shimmy, shake all the way down the building, and it's a 16-foot long wall.
Right.
And it's just not flat.
Most walls
looks
are not
flat.
square.
Well, and that is the one thing people discover when you begin playing with a tool like this, is you really figure out how not square your structure really is.
Yep. And it's also handy too, like if you're going, why does that one door stick all the time? Or what is that window? Why can't I open this window? You put the framing square up there and you're like, oh, well, it's wedged because this thing is way out of whack. And everything.
Exactly.
So, yeah. But anyway, I would call this a must-have item for basically most households. It's also, well, I don't know. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, go ahead, Max.
But anyways, do they make a framing square where it kind of folds in like a ruler too?
Oh, yes.
I like the idea of greater portability, or like the idea of like whipping it out like a switchblade, like when you're about to use it.
Well, I think too, you can even get them where they have complex angles. You can, you can get as fancy with this thing as you want. This is the chuck it in the back of the truck framing square that, and I'm not even pretending I haven't even opened cans of paint with the end of this thing and whatever. This
Boomerang.
is just your. Yeah, it would be good for self-defense if somebody tried to mug you.
I
this
will
in the neck.
freely confess to using one edge of it or another as a chopping tool upon rare occasion.
Right. So okay, pretty straightforward though. So the framing square. So all right, well let's tee this up. I'm going to be very interested. This is going to be a theme today,
and now, Tool Tales with Tool Talk Radio.
And this tool tale is going to be listener participation only. So what do you think of this, Allan? I'm going to call this, for lack of a better term, therapy tools. This is the kind of thing where when you're working with these tools, it's like relaxing. Or if nothing else,
Zen and the tool.
You zen out. Yeah, it's
right.
like when you're working with it, you sort of, your mind escapes. We've talked in the past about how artists, like when they're painting, that's all, Bob Ross, that's why he probably had so much peace of mind. You're focused on that, and it's really therapeutic. So I'm going to call these therapy tools.
I'd like to also kind of wager another idea too. What if it's therapy tools? Yes, in the sense of when you're using them, it's therapeutic. But just also, what if by virtue of their sheer presence alone on the job site, it's therapeutic too?
Oh, I didn't think of that. That's very good, Mac. The comfort of knowing that this tool is
like Allan knowing
at
Dexter
hand.
is there.
So that's what we're looking for, folks. Do you have a tool that's what it's, when you're using it, it gives you that sort of, I got a list here. So if you don't participate, we're jumping in. But
I have a few tools that make it to every job site, not because you thought you needed them on the front end, but because you almost always need it somewhere along the line.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's going to be our tool tail. And the other thing I suppose we could even throw into that mix is the results you get from this tool. Like, in other words, after working with this tool, wow, that's pretty cool. Look at this thing that I just produced.
Or
look
what
at this,
imaginative use did you just put it to?
Right. Or what did what task did I perform with this tool? So get in touch with us at the Big M Roofing and Remodeling Hotline, especially if you have a picture of this tool. But your comments would be welcome at 901-683-0989.
And parrots don't count as tools, but we'd still like to get your parrot pics today.
Yeah, today's World Parrot Day, so a lot on the table. But all right, well that's out there, and let's see. Let me look at the list here. Well, when we come back, let's find out what Allan did this week. You're listening to Tool Talk Radio. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
Remember before when I was talking about smelly garbage standing around being useless? That was a metaphor. I was actually talking about you.
News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis.
I mean, once you explain a metaphor, you destroy the whole point of it, Allan. I mean, but anyway. And welcome back to Tool Talk Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning, here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth from darkoakmedia.com and our pal Max over there behind the glass. And we want to wish all of you a happy World Parrot Day. And we've been learning some fun facts off the air about parrots. If you own a parrot, or I guess we're going to put all of this on the table. What is it? A mynah bird? There's, any of these pet birds that
can outlive you.
That'll outlive you. Yeah. Be aware if you go to get that cute little parrot. This is you're talking like maybe a 50-year commitment here or something. So
you might be talking a multi-generational commitment.
They're going to be in your will and testament.
Yeah, so be careful with that. So, and Max, who did you say is the oldest? You found one that was way up there.
Was the oldest. Let's go back to the Sydney Morning Herald for a clip in the news from 1916. Cocky Bennett, a sulfur-crested Australian cockatoo who died in 1916, was 120 years old. And she was a favorite she was stationed at the Seabreeze Hotel in Tobbs Ugly Point.
Who names these places?
It's the Australians.
Okay, well, they have good senses of humor. But Allan, if my math is correct, that was born in the 1700s.
Yes, George Washington was president when that bird was hatched.
That's insane.
Although she didn't look pretty by the end of her life.
No, it had a feather wasting disease that kills most parrots pretty quickly. Not this one.
No, this one was not going to. You know, the Australians are tough. I didn't know
I
that
got news for you. This
is
how tough.
To their parrots, too. So, and also, we just want to remind you, if you're just tuning in, that we want to hear from you regarding what we're calling therapy tools. And Allan's actually got one himself. We're talking tools that are enjoyable to use, relaxing, and maybe even the results are therapeutic when you're finished using them. And if you got pictures, that's even better. Send them to the Big M Roofing and Remodeling Hotline, 901-683-0989. All right, well, let's dive in, you guys.
Oh, the humanity.
We're going to find out what Allan did this week. So,
well, we're going to start with the tail of a hallway. So,
okay. These days, when I think of a hallway, I think of like the Daredevil hallway fight scene,
this is where that happened,
or the K2SO fight scene, which is pretty good.
This would be where that fight actually happened, except it happened on the ceiling.
Yeah, it tore apart the ceiling. So okay,
you know, I love when people in the 60s, 70s, and 80s got a wild hair to do some kind of new, innovative, decorative design.
I knew the word decorative was coming in here.
I say that word.
Some designer came in and said, "You know what you need to do to jazz up this hallway?
We need to spray little bits of mud all over the ceiling, and we're going to call it orange peel, and we're going to make it a horrible color." And So of course now we're looking at this, 30, 40 years later, going, "What were you thinking?"
Yeah.
Because there is no scraping the stuff off.
No.
It's not coming,
And spackling over it isn't going to hold well. And that's how much work do you want to put in?
Well,
crackle,
all right, you're kind of there because
Yeah.
we did not spackle over it. We mudded over it. So 40 gallons of.
See, I wouldn't.
Oof.
I wouldn't have done that. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, but then I had a secret cheat up my sleeve.
Yeah.
Because once we had it coated, and not coated well, I'm not going to say we did a great job. I'm going to say we slung. Because
how textured is this thing? Because usually there's not that much texture. Did this
have
spikies
this
and
was,
stuff? It was just weird.
This was modern sculpture.
Okay.
However, it has now disappeared behind 1/4-inch sheetrock.
There you go.
Forget sculpting. I'm sure this would make Michelangelo sick.
Yeah, oh, you look at the stuff. Enos went, okay, 1980s faux finish, and you actually used plaster. Thanks.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
Yeah, you had to look up Enos went, and I looked at this, and I went, not a problem. We can fix this in one day.
Yeah, you and I think alike. The 1/4-inch would have been my go-to. Just cover the whole thing up with a clean, nice flat layer.
I didn't want it hollow. I didn't want the wavy whatever.
It was that bad.
It was that bad. It
Holy
looked like a reverse roller coaster. And but they just had hills and valleys and just all kinds of craziness. And it was just kind of like, just mud it over.
Okay.
Just mud it over, and then we broke out. Now, I will say
you were
this.
just leveling, essentially. You weren't even really.
Yeah, all we were doing was slinging, trying to get rid of the hills and valleys, and basically back buttering a piece of sheetrock so we could make it stick until we put the screws in it. And I will say this for using a sheetrock lift. They don't like narrow hallways.
Oh, I didn't think it, because you do have one of those crank up
sheetrock,
sheetrock, like the thing that looks like Frankenstein when he was getting the electricity.
It's and of course the team of course named it. So
I was about to ask, what's the name?
What's the name? Her name is Big Bertha, and she does great work. But I got to tell you, you've got to be so careful around that piece of equipment because it will honestly kill you.
Well, what do you mean by that? Because I wondered about that. Because it cranks up, but then it also has to come down.
It's got to come down, and you have to have tight control of that spin wheel because if somebody knocks the brake off, it's coming down with gravity.
Yeah.
And it will absolutely brain you. So this is one of those machines where you got to talk.
Yeah.
You've got to be telling everybody around this machine what you're doing, where you are, and why you're doing it.
I got
constantly.
I got a question
because
about
you just don't want to get smacked with this thing.
I'm curious about the sheetrock lift because I haven't used one in years. And it's funny, like I said, every time I use stuff like that, the technology's been upgraded. But whenever I've had to use something like a lift to lift up heavy beams and stuff when I'm building something, I always have like 5 things of redundancy. I might even have like vice grips that are clamped onto something so that if something slips, it hits that. Or do you have backup like that with this lift? Is there any way to do something like that? Or
the best thing to do is to secure the brake.
That's what I'm thinking. The brake, but in other words, you reinforce what's holding the brake on.
You reinforce the brake in the brake position.
So, like, maybe wrap a strap around it or something.
Actually, a bungee cord.
Okay,
just take a little bungee cord. That way it keeps it from getting pulled up at a position. It is actually hard to let the brake off, but not impossible.
Well, if somebody
bumped it just right in the right angle, suddenly you're going to get careened in the head with this thing.
Okay.
However, it was one day's worth of work. There was a lot of grunting and sweating and cussing, but, up it went. Screws went in. It looks gorgeous now. It's nice and it's flat. It's not all funky looking. It doesn't look like you're trying to raise bats. It's a big difference. And here's where I'm going to add you a comfort tool tale.
Oh, okay.
On the backside of this property, we're putting in a spa.
Right.
And I'm using one of the new tile leveling technologies. And the tile technology we chose was the spin lift. So you put your spacer in between your tiles, and it's got a little stick that sticks up out of it, and it has a little threaded top on it. So you take these little, looks like the cage out of the game Mousetrap. It really does.
I know. Yeah.
And you spin it on that, and when you get it down to the tiles, you crank it, and it pulls them level.
Yeah.
Either pushes one down or lifts one up or both. And bag number one of these little things, they're supposed to snap off really easily
So you
when
can
you
leave
twist
them
them
underneath.
to the side. Well, you leave the base of it underneath. Bag number one broke off perfectly.
Uh-huh.
Well, that was half the spa.
Yeah.
Bag number two had a bad day, and it wanted to kill people because it left us with a field of plastic shards like punji sticks sticking out of the tile.
Now, when you say that, you know what it's making me wonder? Is this is just plastic and it's a bag, and it's interesting that all of them failed. So was this the one that was in the semi truck when they were shipping it over that was like in the heat, or was it exposed to the sun, or did they leave it near the machine too long? Or
I think this was the Monday morning batch.
There you go. So, okay, so you got, it's just like a batch of cookies or anything else. You got to get it while it's fresh. So, okay, well, we're going to find out more about this epic tale when we come back here on Tool Talk Radio.
Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
You're making a plan while I'm being a man, just winging it.
News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis.
And welcome back to Tool Talk Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning, here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth from darkoakmedia.com and our pal Max over there behind the glass. And if you're just tuning in, you should be aware that today is World Parrot Day.
Joe, you just got a whiff of Cocky Bennett, and you can see why it was so foul-mouthed.
Oh, yeah. Max has been instructed. He showed me a picture of the longest living cockatoo that on record, at least we know, lived to be 120 years, was born at the time when George Washington was president and died in 1916. I mean, holy smokes. You talk about a long run. And this thing did not look better for the journey, Allan. This thing looked, man. Anyway, but so we'd love to know if you're a parrot fan or a cockatoo fan or any of these long living birds.
Or a macaw like that movie Duplex.
Yeah, exactly. So it's funny, Max. When I was 9, we went to Italy, and there was a bird that we were allowed to pick up, and this bird lived on site, and it swore really horribly, but it was in Italian, so I didn't know any better. But I got a good picture of that one. But also, we want to hear from you because, and we're going to chime in. If you don't chime in, we're about to. But today we want to hear from our listeners all about therapy tools, and what we mean by that is maybe there's a certain tool or maybe there's a certain job that you have to do that you find therapeutic. It's not necessarily even a burden. It's just kind of when you're working with this tool, you're like you're zen. You're relaxing the mind.
Or my conjecture is the idea of a tool that's therapeutic just by virtue of its sheer presence on the site.
Yeah, and that's a good premise too, Max. And then also maybe the results of what this tool, the work that you perform with this tool is therapeutic. And anyway, so that's on the table. But and we're going to get back in a minute and find out more about what Allan did this week in Allan's week in review. Before we do that, though, we have some business to take care of. We want to talk about our friends over at Groundworks because they handle the health and really safety of the foundation of your home. And really no two foundations are the same. You may have a crawl space, you may have a basement, you may have a slab. And and depending on where you are in the neighborhood or, the how big of a home you have, all of the dynamics are a little different. But it's important. There's one thing that's very important for all of those is they have to function well, and you have to protect your foundation, and you have to make sure it's healthy, and you can't ignore that. You're a homeowner, you got to take care of this. And foundation problems never get better with age. And so what's great about Groundworks, for one thing, it's a free consultation, And it's almost like getting a free comprehensive, it's like almost getting a free comprehensive medical exam, because what they do is they don't just show up with a clipboard, they show up with detecting equipment, they show up with cameras. They're going to do a full comprehensive exam of the foundation of your home, examining every aspect of it, and then they're going to give you the report. There might even be printouts involved, and they'll let you know what sort of issues they find, and maybe you'll get a clean bill of health. Maybe everything's fine. The good thing, too, about foundation repair is sometimes it might seem very daunting to you, but the solution is not all that big of a deal. But also, we should say, too, that if you're wondering if you have foundation issues, the symptoms sometimes manifest themselves in unusual ways. You might have an odd smell in the crawl space. You might have ants that congregate in a certain part of your house. You might walk across the floor and have these bouncy and squeaky areas over the crawl space. All of those could indicate a problem. So get in touch with our friends over at Groundworks. Like we said, it's a free inspection, and you can't ignore this. So get in touch with them. Go to their website at groundworks.com and book your free inspection today. All right. Well, in Allan's Week in Review, you solved an issue of some hideous sheetrock on the ceiling by just covering it up with quarter-inch sheetrock, which is that would have been my go-to solution.
And my favorite expression is, there's no law against overbuilding.
No. You know what I've noticed, too, about ceilings, Allan? It's easy to ignore the ceiling, and it's easy to just overlook it, but it's amazing when you resolve a ceiling and when you have a nice clean ceiling, what a difference it makes.
It really
changes everything.
Nobody really, it's one of these jobs nobody wanted to tackle because they just didn't want to do it. It wasn't going to be easy. It's a narrow hallway. It's very long. It's 24 feet long. This is going to be some effort.
Yeah.
But the moment that last sheet went into place and everything got screwed in, the look of the hallway completely changed.
Right.
And now it was clean, it was square, it looked good. You didn't have that kind of weird texture at the top of your vision.
Right.
Now it's nice and smooth and flat. And once we get it sanded and painted, it will honestly completely disappear.
And I bet you know what else? It'll probably make the ceiling feel taller. You know how that is? Like you put crown molding up, and all of a sudden the ceiling feels taller.
Yeah, something draws the eye up.
Right.
And, right. Now, the counterpoint to that job going so well was...
Here we go.
We started snapping off these little risers that come with a tile flattening system. And by the way, if you haven't used one of these systems, they're pretty cool.
Well, because you're talking about
the
leveling, because what you're dealing with floor tile that's 6 inches by 16, right? They're subway.
These are the tile we're putting in here is an 8 by 16.
Okay, that's
it's
pretty big.
It's a pretty fair sized tile, and you really want to get those edges nice and close. You don't want to stubbing your toe or something.
If they're not level,
it's going to be a pain.
Yeah.
But it did. The system did as advertised. It leveled the floor. The floor looks good. The grout lines look good. Everything about it went well till we started snapping off the little part that sticks out. And so now I'm left with about a third of this floor that looks like little elven punji sticks waiting to take out your feet.
Gosh, could you imagine stepping on one of the... You think Legos are painful to step on.
And this is where my assistant suddenly goes, "I'll be back." And she disappears into the front and comes back with her new favorite tool that she's already named, of course.
Yeah.
And it is a simple vibratory multi-tool.
Oh, yeah. I know
it's just basically a stick with a little bitty blade on the end of it. And when you turn it on, the end blade just vibrates.
It goes side to side, or it may just, it's got real small cutting teeth.
Yeah, little tiny cutting teeth.
You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of like a hair clipper.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. Don't use it for that. Yeah, don't use it for that.
Right.
However, the blade she chose was exactly what she needed to angle down between the tiles nip off the plastic low enough for us to get the grout in there without damaging anything. And she honestly, I think, had the best time.
Yeah, it sounds like the perfect tool for that
She
job.
was just down there, and I mean, the tool's humming, zzz,
Yeah.
and it's just nipping that little plastic out of there so perfectly. Both of them were very happy. Everybody was ecstatic with the end result. And this is just one of those tools that makes my assistant happy to have on any job site, because you always have that weird little corner. You always have that one little bump sticking up someplace. You got that one tiny little piece that this tool makes absolutely no effort at all about solving.
Because when you were telling me about that, my go-to one would have been those little, like, I don't know, like a wire snip or something that you get in there. But for one thing, you'd have carpal tunnel syndrome at the end of that. You know, like when you're clipping, and you probably couldn't get down into the edge of the top, you know, as easily. So, because you couldn't just yank these out, right?
No, they're trapped. They're trapped in the mastic underneath the tile.
Just so I'm clear, too, though, these leveling things, I'm almost picturing these are like little car jacks, almost like they twist.
They look exactly like that.
And then you break off the top. So, okay, that makes sense.
I'll bring some in next week so we can have some pictures for people to look at.
Yeah.
And there's several different systems. There's some that use little wedges. There are some that use like a push-down thing. This one just looked hilarious because it looks like little mousetrap games.
Right.
And I just got to tell you, though, whoever thought these up stayed up late one night because they really do a nice job.
I bet money it's somebody that installs tile.
Somebody had to go, I am so tired of trying to level this stuff.
Okay, so it sounds like a pretty successful operation then. So, okay, well then, no horrifying things, and in fact, it reinforced kind of what we were talking about having the right tool in the right situation, and you, like you said, she probably, I bet you she was in Zen, in a Zen mindset, just clipping these things off. It works perfectly.
There's two people standing there going, "What are we gonna do? This is terrible. This is terrible," and she's like,
"Hold my beer.
I'll be right back. Here, hold my root beer.
Exactly.
I'll be right back." And it's just. Well, I will freely tell you my favorite Zen tool in the whole world is my sledgehammer.
Now, that's interesting.
That baby never leaves the truck.
Is that smack?
That is smack.
So destruction brings you peace of mind.
Well, all right, case in point, just stopped by a friend's house, and the mailbox had gotten old.
Oh, okay.
So one mailbox came out, another mailbox went in. Couple of taps with a sledgehammer, all installed.
Okay, that's out.
Destruction is the prelude to creation.
There you go. Okay, all right. Well, in that vein, let's dive a little bit deeper into therapy tools when we come back here on Tool Talk Radio.
Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
Everything that has transpired has done so according to my design.
News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis.
That's what you say at the end of every job, right, Allan? I mean,
usually, yeah. Actually,
okay.
that's actually a fair comment.
And welcome back to Tool Talk Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning, here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth from darkoakmedia.com and our pal Max over there behind the glass. And we'd love to hear from you regarding your feelings about World Parrot Day, or if you've ever owned a parrot, or if you ever regretted owning a parrot. Or maybe your grandmother owned a parrot and the thing's still around and you inherited it and you're wondering, how much longer do I have, to deal with this? Get in touch with us. Also, let's unpack this other thing we've been talking about. We've been talking about therapy tools today, and this is listener participation. We'd love to know if you have any therapy tools that you find therapeutic. In other words, when you're using them, it's more or less a relaxing experience, or at least at the very least, maybe the results that you get from this tool are relaxing.
I have
or something.
one.
All right, go ahead, Max, because I got a whole list here.
In my minimal experience with tools or using them, I'd say one of the most therapeutic ones I've ever had to date is the lathe.
Oh, okay, because you used a lathe before, right?
I have used a lathe before. I just find it very satisfying to see like like the contact between the chisel and the piece of wood, and then seeing like the shavings kind of come off and everything. It's the one instance where where the waste material is actually a fairly pleasant experience rather than the other way, rather than it not.
Well, depending on what you're cutting, what type of wood you're using, it's either therapeutic or you want to throw it through a window. Because if you're using, and just fair warning, if you want to get into wood turnings, do not use oak unless you're really, really good. Don't start with it. Start with maple. That would be my suggestion. The right wood makes a difference, Alan, and make sure you have a sharp. Make sure your tools are properly sharpened. Otherwise, but it's interesting, Max, because that's at the top of my list, the wood lathe. What I like about the lathe, Alan, is that you start seeing results. Once you get that thing rounded off, you start seeing results immediately. It reminds me a lot of these pottery shows that my wife and I watch, where when they're throwing something on the wheel, like you start right away. It's like, wow, you get the curve of the bowl or whatever. But I got a list here, Alan. But what do you have any that you want to mention before I get into mine?
Mine are going to be in the kind of unusual category because, honestly, the two tools that everybody knows I have in the truck at all time is, and of course, everybody has to name all of my tools for me.
Yeah.
So I have yellow and smack. And yellow is a wrecking bar. It's a 4 foot tall. You've seen it plenty of times on job sites.
Yeah.
I've had this thing longer than Max over here has been alive.
Right.
And, it's just a big yellow wrecking bar. And I have used it for everything from a spacer to literally shoving a house back onto a foundation of, it's just one of those bizarre tools that you need. Case in point, a delivery dropped off a pallet full of insert large heavy objects here and put it in such a place that we couldn't get the pallet jack under it.
Yeah.
They dropped it off and, and boom, 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 stacked them up and left. Well, now we got to deal with it.
Yeah.
And all right, well, this is where yellow would come in, and you could just slip it under there and lift it up enough to wedge it over a few inches. Do it again, walk it around to where, now you can get your pallet jack under it and move this stuff without having to fight with, a 2,000-pound pallet. So it's just little things. And, of course, the sledgehammer, it's not always about, busting a hole through a wall. It's tapping a mailbox into place. Or you've got, there's a big one. A lot of people in the Mid-South have bricked walls.
Right.
And you get a brick or something that starts pushing forward, well, you can just kind of put a board between them. You don't want to hit the brick, but tap, 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 pushes it back into the wall nice and firm, moves the soil back in, and, a little tiny touch up on the mortar, and boom, your wall's back in good shape.
Speaking of walls, because with a sledgehammer, sometimes you have to use a sledgehammer to tap a wall back into place or something, or when you're framing a house or something like that. And that's
done that
handy
many times.
What's interesting about this therapy tool concept is as I was listening to you, Alan, I was thinking about the psychological, what this says about the person's psychology, why you chose these, because the tools I chose are much different than the ones you chose. And it seems like if you were on the couch and I was psychoanalyzing you,
like a Rorschach test,
I was thinking it was like, I was like, okay, well, it seems like, so he the first two that Allan goes to they can involve destruction, but they also involve solving a problem that might take 3 or 4 people with one lever, one simple thing. So it speaks to your desire for efficiency, I think.
Kind of like that Indiana Jones movie where the guy's swinging the sword and he just shoots them.
Yeah, just
on
boom,
occasion,
just cut to the chase. Yeah. Okay, you have 5 people around wringing their hands, like, how are we going to move this thing? Yeah. It's like, stand back, boom, you're done and
hold
stuff.
my root
so
beer. There you go.
okay, well, among mine, a lot of mine have to do with cutting implements, like the lathe, which is technically you use that to cut wood. Well, one I used last week, and I had to borrow from my wife. It was her reciprocating saw. We had a dead tree way in the back of our property that finally fell over, and part of it was hanging over the fence onto the street, so we didn't want that just falling onto a car or something. So I had to get it out and more or less dismantle the tree piece by piece and let it fall to the ground and then chop it up. But there's something really satisfying, especially when you have that 12-inch pruning blade and you get instant results, and especially when you've got all this junk in the way and 20 minutes later it's just gone. And you're piece by piece eliminating it.
I actually gave a client my pruning blade this week.
Yeah.
Because he was, I don't know what I'm going to do about this. I got to get this thing up, and these roots are everywhere, and I just went, Merry Christmas. Slap this baby into your reciprocating saw.
Right.
It will solve your problems.
Yeah, exactly.
He's like, and I'm like, just don't get too excited, man. They're for sale at every big box store, but here you go. I'm going to buy a new one anyway because you're going to ruin this one by getting it in the dirt. But go for it.
Right.
And there is something so satisfying when you have the right tool for the right job, and something that was absolutely daunting becomes, yeah, I got this.
I got that. And plus, one thing about that is there's no measuring involved. You're not whipping out a tape measure and say, what, you're just getting in there, and so it's part carnage and part efficiency. It's really cool. Here's one that you probably, I don't know, I think you will appreciate it. I think other people have to think twice about this. The drill press. Oh gosh. Because you have to drill holes, and I got to admit, I don't own a drill press. I own a rig that converts a hand drill into a drill press, but you know this, Allan. It's like, okay, I got these 50 holes I got to drill in these 50 different blocks. And you set up a little jig, and you put it in there, and boom, you get the exact depth you want. It's not wobbling around. It's perfectly straight. A drill press is a great, Max, have you ever used a drill press?
Can't say that I have.
Okay, somebody out there.
I will say this isn't like a therapy tool, but what if it's parts of a tool that are sort of therapeutic? For example, you said you like the idea of having like a hex bit at the end of your drill bits rather than a circular bit.
Oh, yeah. That's a good point. Yeah, where you can just quickly switch bits and everything like that.
Blocking your new ammo.
Well, this is gonna be an ongoing theme, and in fact, we'll probably even extend this, in the weeks ahead. But we'd love to hear from you about therapy tools in your arsenal. Well, hour one of Tool Talk Radio is in the can, but stand by. We've got a full hour, hour two coming up.
News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis. Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
And welcome back to Tool Talk Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning, here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth from darkoakmedia.com and our pal Max over there behind the glass. And if you're just tuning in, well, you've missed quite a bit. We heard all about what Allan did this week. We discussed our must-have item of the week, which is a 12-inch by 8-inch framing square. That was riveting. No, it was actually pretty good.
It's actually kind of fun. It's a good tool.
And we also know that today is World Parrot Day, and we're looking for submissions. We want to see pictures of your parrots or any of these what are they called, cockatoos or mynah birds or whatever.
I'll take recipes.
Long living birds. And also we are in the middle of a conversation all about therapy tools, which we'll get back to in a second.
We actually got a text regarding therapy tools.
Okay, talk to me.
So thank you, Jack, again.
Okay.
Jack seems to be a pretty loyal person because way back in the day, he helped us try to name, I forget what we were trying to name, but he was
the winner of that contest. Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the winners of the contest. But anyways, he was saying that he finds using Forstner bits in my drill press to be both soothing and relaxing. The sound and sight associated with the peeling of long ribbons of paper-thin wood is so satisfying.
Oh, Amen, brother. Now, we should tell people now a Forstner bit is that boring bit, right, that we're talking about. It looks, if you look at it from the end, it looks like a S, almost like a not a Superman S, but not unlike a Superman S. But boy, a Forstner bit, it can drill some clean holes. And when it's cutting properly, boy, it's like ribbons, like little thin shavings of like almost like Swiss cheese or something like that, right, Alan? I don't disagree with them. And especially on the drill press, nice and level, nice and flat.
It's kind of ironic because the last thing that he contributed had to do with naming a woodpecker.
Oh, that's right. What was the name? Because it was a pretty good one. It was Habit. It was like a fancy Latin sounding name.
It was Piccadilly Peckerton.
No,
Piccadilly Peckerton. You're thinking of the other ones. You're thinking of Sciurus Chris Maximus for the squirrel.
Oh, that's right. He's good at naming things. So, all right. Well, Jack, I totally agree. I'm curious what Jack does, why he's got these types of tools. So, Jack, I'd love to know why you're boring bits with a Forstner bit, because a Forstner bit strikes me as a serious woodworker. You know. You don't just have that laying around, usually, I think.
Yeah, we use...
That bit is not inexpensive.
No, they're very expensive. Well, compared to, like, just regular drill bits and stuff, they're pretty expensive. We used them a lot in, when I'm working on medical facilities, because you need very precise work.
Right.
Yep. So, yeah, I totally appreciate that.
Max, it sounds a little like he's got the same experience you had when you were talking about the wood lathe, because when you have the right shavings coming off the wood lathe, it's not like sawdust. It's like little ribbons of wood. And when it comes off, it's pretty satisfying when you get a clean cut like that. All right. Well, here's a therapy tool for me, Alan, and I think you'll probably have a similar point of view. So I mentioned the drill press was something. And so have you ever had this situation? I had a job last year where I had to cut like 300 blocks of wood that were all going to be the same size. They were forming the dental molding around that room addition that I built.
Oh, okay.
And so we're talking 1.5 by 1.5, and it was like 4 inches long. And I had to cut. I had all these pieces I had to cut. Well, as you know, you're not going to sit there and measure and mark 400. You're gonna basically what you do is you set up a little stopping block, and I used my miter saw and chopped away, and it took it was like 2 hours of cutting or something, but it was really relaxing because there's no measuring. Right. You're just cutting, and I had a brand new clean blade on there. So I would say a miter saw, but my much more therapeutic tool, and it works similar to that, is a radial arm saw. I don't own a radial arm saw. Do you? I've always wanted one. I just don't have room in my garage for one. But
I actually have something or a question regarding your miter saw, because I have used a miter saw in the past, and it was not therapeutic, but it's perhaps because I didn't use it correctly.
Oh, if you don't, it's dangerous. But also, what do you mean?
So it was pretty cool. So I got the opportunity to go to a high school where they had theater tech, which is where you build sets and everything behind the scenes and everything. So they had a laser guided miter saw where if the laser detected a potential problem, it would stop automatically. But anyway, so nice. I was using the miter saw, and it was cutting down, and then all of a sudden the piece of wood got stuck on the blade, even after I lifted it up.
All right, it sounds like a dull, but what do you think that is, Alan? It sounds like a dull blade, or I don't know how that...
That is actually wedging.
I know what it was. He pinched the blade. Yep. He pinched the wood down.
He got the wood pinched, and he grabbed the blade.
Max, this is a good PSA moment, because if you're using something like that, you got to make sure the wood has somewhere to fall to. Maybe you had it supported too high on the edge or something, Max, and then so as you push the blade down, it's actually wedging in. Yep. So your supports needed to be moved, probably.
Grab it, and on occasion, I'll even grab it and throw it.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, that gets good and dangerous.
But Alan, have you ever used I love, and I should explain what a radial arm saw is. It looks similar to a miter saw, but everything is on the top. Like there's an arm, and especially, and you can have radial arm saws that can come out, 3
Sounds like a heavy
feet
metal band name.
It's cool. Well, Max, imagine like a circular saw, but everything is up above, so you have your hand above it. The wood is on a platform below, and you pull it across the top, and it's just a really satisfying tool. I just don't have room in my garage for one.
I use them on different job sites on occasion. Depends on how much cutting we got to do.
Oh, I see what it looks like. That is pretty cool.
They have portable ones. They function like a miter saw. But I wonder about if those can come. I guess I just wonder about the accuracy of those, Alan, because there's a lot of bang. These are going in somebody's work truck. They come loose. They jiggle like a radial arm saw. I'm thinking of is like in a wood shop where it's fixed and it's really solid.
Right. Well, I had to balance one about 3 weeks ago because somebody was like, "Well, I'm trying to cut this angle and it's not fitting," and I was like, I could see by the eyeball that was nowhere close to the angle they were telling me it was.
Yeah.
So I had to go around on the back side of the saw, and of course something had banged into it and had bent the angle indicator. So it was off by like 15 degrees.
Right.
So we're back bending that in place, and actually this is where your little angle square came in. Because I used one of those without the saw being plugged in to make sure when I set the angle, when I pulled it down, I actually had a clean 90-degree angle.
That's important.
And the indicator said it was a clean 90-degree angle, so that now when I moved it to 30 degrees, I was at a degree of confidence that it was actually at 30 degrees.
Okay.
I actually have not a therapy tool that I've used before, but an aspiring therapy tool. Like when I see other people using it, I find it really cool.
Okay.
These people, like you said, like with a radial arm saw, like how when it's most likely going to be used in a wood shop itself. Well, when I would watch these like wood shop shows, I love seeing people use those tools where you can make mortise and tenon joinery.
Oh, yeah.
Or like those really fat saw blades where you can cut
dado joints.
Yeah, dado joints.
Yep.
Yeah, fine woodworking.
Those are fun.
Yep.
Oh,
go ahead, man.
I was going to say, you were going to say, but Jack actually had a project that he's using Forstner bits for. Like he sent a picture of what the project was.
Oh, okay.
Awesome.
We'll have to check that out at the break. So, all right. Well, I wondered because that's some serious drilling.
Because he said he used the Forstner bit to make wells to capture juices that flow from the channels when he's cutting meat. So he's got a cutting board, and he's using it to kind of capture the juices when he's cutting the meat.
Awesome.
Okay, well, now we know Allan's interested in there. So, he's a chef and a woodworker.
He says he's a professional sawdust maker and an extremely amateur woodworker.
Awesome.
But he makes great sawdust. So, all right, well, Jack, we appreciate that, man. That's awesome. And he sent pictures, which is what you want. Well, Allan, here's the number. I suspect this would probably be number one on most people's list. Even though it's something I don't necessarily always approve of, but let's just be honest, the pressure washer. What is more relaxing than using a pressure washer? You know what I mean? Or I guess it could get frustrating if you're in a hurry.
At least you didn't say leaf blower, because that's the most torturous.
Leaf blowers are not bad if you're not on the receiving end of that. But a pressure washer is kind of no harm, no foul in terms of the noise. Unless you got a really noisy one. But,
I showed a client how to use her pressure washer this week, and I already have the report that the patio has never looked better.
Right. Well, it's fun. I mean, it is a fun tool to use.
It is a fun tool.
It's kind of like a cross between a flamethrower and a machine gun that doesn't hurt anybody. You know what I mean? It's like you're pointing it. You got all this pressure. Now,
it is the video game tool.
It is. And you got to have the setting right, though, or you wind up with all these little squiggly lines all over your driveway. But there are better ways to clean things. And please don't use a pressure washer on the siding of your house. It's gonna get into the house, into the studs and everything like that. But all right, well, that's our therapy tool discussion, and we're going to keep that open for the weeks ahead. But when we come back, this is going to be very interesting. In our great moments in building history, we're going to talk about the Kon-Tiki raft.
Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
You may feel a slight sighing.
News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis.
And welcome back to Tool Talk Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning, here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth from darkoakmedia.com and our pal Max over there behind the glass. And if you're just tuning in, we're talking about a lot of things, including World Parrot Day. But we were in the middle of a conversation about therapy tools, and we're getting some feedback. I just want to say one of our loyal listeners, Jack, who I will say is a model texter and communicant. For one thing, he doesn't contact us with 30 seconds before the show's over. He contacts us early. He sends pictures. He gets to his point. It's easy to read. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure if he can beat Deuce, though.
There's no typos. Well, Deuce stands alone. But Jack, we posted the picture of your cutting board, and now it makes sense to me how you were using your Forstner bit.
Mm-hmm.
It looks cool, Allan. It looks like it's practical. It collects the juices on there.
Yes, it keeps you from having runoff onto your counter.
So if you go to our if you go to @ToolTalkRadio on Facebook, you can check out the beautiful cutting board. There's a lot of woods involved there. I was trying to count how many different woods he used there. So, but before we move on, you said Jack had a comment.
Patrick had another.
Oh, Patrick. Okay.
The Forstner bits, I guess, are just popular. He said that he likes using them to bore holes in a slab of walnut to make a mantle.
Now, I don't get what he means by making a mantle with boring hole. Are we talking to make room for dowels or something?
No, he's probably making room for the lag bolts going into the studs.
Oh, well, I want to find out for sure, but that makes sense. So,
And then he also has a very creative method for pressure washing. He says, speaking of pressure washers, I use drones to pressure wash tall buildings. And he actually has like an action shot.
Wait a minute,
And it is
Allan.
just awesome.
Okay, hold on, because I'm thinking, okay, well, the handle of the pressure washer isn't all that heavy, but the water sure is, and the hose attached to it, and
He
this
has
must
some
be a
serious
serious
drones.
drone.
He's got
action.
some serious drones.
Okay, and he sent a picture?
Yes.
All right, well, we'll have to post that at the next break. So, wow. Now, that's interesting. I suppose, you have a camera on the
Yeah,
the
pretty much
drone
every
and that?
drone on the planet comes with some kind of camera. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Now that is interesting. Is that going to put window washers out of? I don't think so. A window that's different. Pressure washing something is different than, than a window washing situation, right? Because
this is going to be more for accumulated debris or possibly pigeon mess or something like that.
I was about to say, what if you're trying to chase off those squirrels or the pigeons or something,
Or
like
the parrots.
Right. So. Okay, cool. We'll keep them coming in, and we're gonna accept submissions of your therapy tools for the weeks ahead, because it's just an interesting topic. So, but yes, it's time to shift gears, you guys.
And now, great moments in building history.
Well, Max, I got to give credit where credit is due. This was your suggestion, and I wasn't sure when you told me about it at first, but after researching it, this was a really good one. Do you want to tell us what we're going to discuss today?
Well, let's go back to 1947 with a man by the name of Thor Heyerdahl. And you know what I like about him is that he's one of those people where rather than trying to prove a theory by just writing books about it, he actually goes to the length of, all right, let's build it and test it out.
Oh yeah, this guy's an engineer. He's a scientist. Really, I mean, he puts his money where his mouth is.
And this literally wouldn't be his first rodeo.
Right.
He wasn't done after this.
Well, he was, and he's one of these where he has a theory. This guy, I mean, let's face it, the guy was an adventurer, and he had a theory, and it had to do with now the Pacific Ocean is fascinating because there's so many currents there. It's near the equator in places too, where the water is so warm. We saw that movie Castaway with Tom Hanks, where literally he's out floating on a raft and it's warm enough to be. We've seen the movie The Life of Pi, all these others. Well, he was trying to prove something along the lines of how the people could have gone from Polynesia to
South America to Polynesia.
And because there was debate, right? All the other scientists disagreed with him, Allan, or something. And he's like, oh, yeah, well using the question was, using the wood that they had at hand, which was balsa wood, could they construct boats that would get them there? Because we're talking, 3,000 miles or something across the Pacific Ocean?
Well, let's start with nobody knows they're primitive.
Yeah, they're
It's the year 1000. Nobody is sitting around going, gosh darn, I wish I'd been born 500 years from now when they have electricity. Because you don't know.
You live
So, starting with Tutankhamun and going forward,
right.
archaeologists, especially from the turn of the 19th century, when we get into, we go from 19th to 20th century, we're in 1905 and that kind of stuff. We are really in this golden age, not of exploration, but of discovery.
Yeah.
Because we already know where it is. Now we're just finding out how many other people knew about it before us.
So rediscovery more so.
So one of the big theories at the time was these kind of rocks with holes in them. And somebody said, well, we think they're anchors.
Oh, I see. Because there would have been rope going through the.
There would have been a rope or a cord of
Yeah.
some kind going through it. And they're kind of finding them all over Melanesia, Polynesia, all the way up into Asian waters and all the way to South America. So here comes Thor Heyerdahl, and he just goes, all right, let's go build one.
Yeah.
And everybody went, what? And he went, no, seriously, let's just build the Kon-Tiki. Let's throw this baby in the water and see what it does.
And Kon-Tiki is a reference to the Inca sun god Viracocha. It's
Yes.
another possible name for that. So,
Right.
and not only that too, but I like the fact that they use balsa wood, because I was even molding this idea in my head where it's like, could balsa wood be used for anything other than just relegating it to science projects or school projects? Well, it's like, well,
Well, one, balsa is not what you think it is, because everybody in the United States these days, you think of balsa wood as some kind of thin thing that
You can
you
just
get at
snap
the
in
hobby
half.
store.
Right.
That's really, really delicate. What you haven't seen is somebody the size of Max walking down the side of the road with a 10-foot long, 3-foot around tree trunk over his shoulder,
Yeah.
because balsa is a tree.
Right.
It's, it's
it has
a
to stand up, so
full-size
it's gotta
tree.
be strong. Yeah.
So, it's strong enough to stand on its own, and when it's thick enough, it has some rigidity. But the other thing about Polynesian design was the raft itself, I guess by our standards, would be a little rickety, a.k.a. it flexes and bends. So
There
it
you go.
flexes and bends with the motion of the water.
Well,
that kinda-
that's
there
what
was-
appealed to you, right, Max? The
yeah,
whole-
exactly. Is the idea of not building it flexibly, kind of like the pagodas in Japan that were built to be earthquake resistant because they weren't bolted together. They were kind of allowed to sway. But that kind of makes me think of this quote. I actually ended up watching Heyerdahl's documentary on the expedition itself. And he said that the ancient design was for you to not resist Mother Nature, but to, go flow with her, Emma, and follow her orders and to adapt accordingly.
Right.
Yeah, allow for flexibility, which is why a raft is perfect, because you're going to be going over waves. And so the beautiful thing about a raft is, yeah, you had water splashing up onto the deck, but then it just runs right through back down. So you're not worried about flooding. You're not worried about capsizing because of that.
You know what's interesting, too, is the mission also was very close to not being successful if they had listened to their naysayers, because even when the type of balsa log that they chose to cut down and fell and then attach was, they wanted to have ones that were freshly cut rather than dried out.
Right, which is important because exactly. It's funny because as you learn about the story of this expedition, all the bureaucrats and all these so-called experts, he basically went against their advice and he was successful. This was, spoiler alert, this was a hugely successful expedition. It proved all the points he was trying to prove, and they made it there safely. The only there was one casualty, which we'll probably reference. Let's just say the bird didn't make it. The parrot got washed overboard.
There was a parrot by the name of Lorita,
Yeah.
and she was starting to speak, apparently, according to one of Heyerdahl's men, she was starting to speak Spanish with a Norwegian accent.
Right. And that bird looked like it was having fun. I mean, it was showing off on the deck. It was having an adventure. It went out, in a blaze of glory.
Went out well. But, so here the thing is, nobody, when they developed these ships, thought they were primitive. This was the height of our technology.
Yeah.
And it worked.
And what I like about it is this basically reinforces a lot of things we've talked about here on Tool Talk Radio regarding the nature of wood. And we're going to talk about that when we come back here on Tool Talk Radio.
Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
Would you please come help me tamp this down? It's a job that requires 2 men.
News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis.
And welcome back to Tool Talk Radio, everybody. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning, here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth from darkoakmedia.com and our pal Max over there behind the glass. And I guess, Allan, the listeners have finally woken up because, the texters have woken up. Patrick sent us we've been talking about, therapy tools. We've been talking about, World Parrot Day. Jack sent us a really nice picture of a cutting board that he made. I just posted that on our Facebook page, so go to @ToolTalkRadio if you want to check that out. And during the break, I also posted a picture. Another listener of ours, Patrick, man, this is cool. He has a drone with a pressure washer attachment, which to me seems like, I mean, this drone looks serious. You can use it to wash buildings, and everything.
He didn't get this one at the big box store for $19.95.
No, and so we posted a picture of that too, and it's pretty impressive. It's a pretty impressive setup.
So it's not the parrots that activate the text line; it's the Forstner bits and pressure washers.
You never know. You never know, Max.
Pressure washers are a lot more fun than parrots. I promise you.
Exactly. Well, we're going to circle back in just a moment to our conversation in Great Moments in Building History. We're talking about the Kon-Tiki raft, which is a raft used in a really interesting expedition in 1947. Before we do that, though, let's talk about our good buddy Jay Hill with Big M Roofing and Remodeling, because
I've given up on finding music for him right now.
Yeah, we're going to have to just do that because for weeks we've been looking for his walk-up music. But when it comes to innovation, and when it comes to resourcefulness, and when it comes to creative thinking, we love Jay Hill. Jay is all about, for one thing, he's all about the exterior protection of your home, from roofing to gutters to siding to windows, and all interior and exterior remodeling except kitchens and bathrooms. He wants no part of that. And at least he's honest about it up front. He's like, no, I don't want to be there for 6 months picking out tile and whatever. He likes to get in, get the job done, and go to the next project. So, but we always lean heavily into his roofing expertise, because Jay is for one thing, he's always 5 stars with the Better Business Bureau, which is that's really not an easy thing to do. We sort of just mention that, but that's a big deal. He's a GAF Master Elite installer. He has 30 lenders at his disposal. This is a fully functioning, fully operational setup, and he's one of the top-rated roofers in this entire region, and with good reason. These are, for one thing, roofing systems that are so well made and so well engineered. They're going to actually lower they're going to make your roof run cooler, which is a great thing. It's going to lower your utility bills. It's lowered mine, I can tell you that. I'm sure it's lowered yours, Allan, because you and I both have a roof from Jay Hill.
We do.
And also what sets Jay apart is the fact that beyond his dynamic and enthusiastic personality is the fact that Jay is a former insurance agent, which is hugely helpful, because if you have a situation where maybe you have damage to your home and the question is this going to be covered by my homeowner's insurance? Well, it's really important that Jay is the first person you call, because it's a whole process, and you need really an advocate in that situation. And so Jay knows all of the protocols. He knows what's involved in that process. And so he's going to come over. It's a free consultation. It's going to be very comprehensive. They're going to examine all of the damage. And if you have a path forward, Jay is there to help you navigate that entire claims process, which, like we said, is a huge advantage. And it also it gives you some peace of mind knowing that you're fully informed and you know your situation. But Jay also encourages you to call him directly. He wants you to call him on his cell phone. You can reach Jay at 901-484-5645 or go to bigmroofingandremodeling.com.
You suggested that Big M Roofing's music be Peter Gabriel's Sledgehammer.
Well, Deuce has expensive taste, and so does Jay. I mean, I guess they don't understand the concept of royalty-free music. You know, Deuce, we can't be paying Peter Gabriel for this stuff. We need music that's what on the royalty-free list, right, Max?
Mm-hmm.
So,
I wonder what his therapy tool would be. Jay's one.
what about Jay, or I thought you were talking about Deuce?
I don't want to know that. Or yes, I kind of do.
Yeah, maybe just text it in though. Please don't call Deuce because we might have to filter that. So, all right. Well, Allan, before the break, we were talking about something really interesting. And what's nice is, folks, if you're interested in this, the Kon-Tiki expedition. Let me spell that. It's Kon-Tiki, Tiki, and it was an expedition. This Thor Heimdall, boy, this guy. You know, it's not. He's kind of like an Indiana Jones type of thing. It's like, okay, yeah, I have these theories, but instead of just, working these out on a chalkboard or writing books about them, he's like, I have a theory, so we're going to build a boat in the same manner that his theory was. How could you get from, was it Polynesia to, or
it's the reverse? It's South America
to Polynesia, because his theory was that the people from South America populated and migrated to go ahead, Max.
To the Polynesian islands, near Tahiti. But what's interesting too is that he was also kind of like like you said, he was an explorer at heart. He tested his theories, but he also discovered things that were vitally important to modern society today while he was on his expeditions. Like, he discovered species of fish that we had never seen before.
Well, that's interesting because people will go, well, how did that happen? Well, it's very simple, because when you're cruising along on a nice, quiet raft, this raft, we should mention, his theory was because if you look at the wind currents, the wind was always blowing from, it was blowing from west to east, right? Or no, it was going from east to west, and the wind and the current in the ocean, it was almost like a river. And his theory was the people could have built a boat and coasted and used the sails to naturally wind up there.
He was more along the lines of a proponent of, rather than viewing the oceans as an obstruction to civilization, between civilizations, he viewed them as highways.
Right. Yeah, it gets you there. It gets you, it's a straight shot. But when you talked about the fish, it was interesting because they're cruising along on this nice, quiet little raft, and they even had fish that jumped up on their boats regularly.
There's actually a pretty funny quote from it, because he documented his expeditions. Not only did he make a documentary movie about it, but he also did like a journal that became like a book. And he said, 17th May, Norwegian Independence Day, heavy sea, fair wind. I am cooked today, and I found 7 flying fish on deck, 1 squid on the cabin roof, and 1 unknown fish in a Torstein's sleeping bag.
Yeah. Now, this is when men were men, Allan. I mean, these guys are out there. They were acting like this was the best vacation they ever had. They were on this boat for, I want to say, 101
days.
That's a long time to be just floating along on a raft. You think of seasickness, you got to catch your dinner.
Loretta got seasick.
Yeah. And so, I mean, this is not a small thing, and you have to make sure the boat stays together.
And I'm going to add one more word to this, and that is attitude.
Talk to me.
All right.
Because I know where you're going with that, yeah.
There
were 6 guys on this.
There were 6 guys, but their attitudes were aligned. So what you had was my favorite joke that I've told for about 50 years, my favorite dad joke. How they built the pyramids. They wanted to.
There you go.
So if you've got like-minded individuals with very similar overlapping goals, and I'm going to add overlapping skills. So...
Well, you could say complementary skill sets, because one guy was the radio operator. One guy was
but nobody was irreplaceable, and nobody was more important than anybody else.
Right.
So what you had was a natural flow of society.
Yeah.
Based on how this boat worked.
Yeah.
And that's Thor Heimdall gets mad props for he and his crew being able to achieve a synchronicity between the craft and the crew, because the crew wasn't fighting each other. As you said, when you watch the documentary, the crew is pretty darn chilled and groovy.
They were like I said, I was looking at like how did you survive, and they were like, gosh, it was so relaxing.
They were club. They were at Club Med.
Right.
Fish were, I'm a little hungry. Somebody beat on the bottom of the boat and have something jump in.
Right.
They looked
and they
at
had
it,
sharks chasing them the whole way. They're like,
and whales.
And whales.
Well, all right, but see, that's what happens in the Big Blue.
Yeah.
If you are a floating object, you naturally attract life to you. So this was something we didn't really understand until we began doing experiments like this.
Right.
And what I like too is like this was a like you mentioned off the air, Joe. This is an example of the brotherhood of men, because it's like he was using these opportunities, like like people who go to the space station to test other theories. Like he's testing out like military rations for the U.S. Army. He's also proving other minor theories too about like even something as simple as ancient water storage methods. They brought along like 200 gallons of water, and half of them were in modern equipment, and then the other half were in simple bamboo constructions. And so It's like he was proving that ancient peoples could have brought plenty amount of fresh water with them on their expeditions to get from South America to Polynesia.
And they collected rainwater. So there was and they fished. And they also discovered that if you dilute seawater, like in a pinch, if you're really stuck, you could dilute seawater with fresh water and survive. They did a 40% seawater as an experiment, and they found they could drink it. And so there was all sorts of ink. They found they had fish that they cut open, and
Cuttlefish.
they had ink, and they wrote in their diary with this. And there's a really heartwarming story at the end of this. So we've got a little more to discuss with the Kon-Tiki expedition when we come back here on Tool Talk Radio.
News Talk 98.9, the roar of Memphis. Tool Talk Radio with Joe and Allan.
Brought to you by Fishy Sam's Organic Aftershave. Let's face it, men, there's nothing more attractive to a woman than a tough guy who works hard. And there's no one who works harder than deep sea fishermen. So before you head off for that big date, spray on a blast of Fishy Sam's Organic Aftershave, and you can hit the town smelling like the inside of a cargo hold on a North Atlantic tuna boat. Nothing screams testosterone like the smell of decaying fish. Man up with Fishy Sam's Organic Aftershave.
I can't do better than that, Max. And welcome back to Tool Talk Radio, everybody. Very on point. I'm Joe Thorderson with Thor's Hammer, Carpentry and Wood Turning, here with my buddy Allan Gilbreth from darkoakmedia.com and our pal Max over there behind the glass. And if you're just tuning in, boy, we got a lot to wrap up here in this last segment. We're in the middle of a conversation talking about the Kon-Tiki expedition, which is basically Thor Heimdall and 5 other guys. Heyerdahl. They set out in 1947 to prove a theory. They built a raft out of balsa wood. And just go on YouTube. Trust me, you can watch the documentary. There was a 1951 documentary that won Best Documentary of the Year by the Academy Awards, and it's really good. I watched it. Max, you watched it, and very entertaining. It's only 50 minutes long. It's really, really good, but the story is very uplifting. I just want to say one thing real quick, too, Allan, because the ironic thing is that for one thing, this raft was really, really well engineered, and it was built using the technology that the Polynesian or the South American people would have had 1,000 years ago, and no nails, no anything. They built it with rope. They built it with balsa wood, and it made it across the ocean, even though the naysayers said it wouldn't even make it halfway there. I do want to say one thing, though. There's a really nice at the end of this. They brought along a radio, and it was a ham radio, like the kind Art Bell always used, and so you could broadcast long distances. And there was a boy, because they came across the people in Tahiti, and there was a boy, I think he was 8 or 9 years old, he was dying. He had some sort of something like a tumor on his head. Well, using the radio, they did a remote operation on him, and they had penicillin, and they had and they saved the kid's life.
Yeah.
Isn't that cool? I mean, and they made friends with the folks, and they were exchanging things. They gave them some of their equipment, and the Tahitians gave them some gifts. It was really a feel good story. So, but one thing I want to say is the naysayers said using balsa trees. Make sure their idea was they had these big balsa tree logs. I think there were 7 or 8 of them. 9. And they said, make sure you let it dry out, right, and then use ropes to attach it. Well, Thor said, no, we're using actual like you cut it down and you start building right away.
And I think there's like this stuff inside the logs called like pith or something like that.
Yes.
And it proved correct because the idea was that water could only penetrate a couple inches in there before it hit the sap and it hit all the things inside, and that made it stable. And also the other part of that is by using a soft wood and then latching it with ropes, and then the ropes swell up and it digs into the wood, and it worked perfectly. It was the same properties we always talk about here on the show with wood being flexible, not fighting it, and using the natural elements of this to make us successful structure. So anyway, get on YouTube and check this out. The Kon-Tiki expedition is really fascinating.
And he didn't rest on his laurels either. He liked the idea, like I said before, he viewed the Kon-Tiki expedition. He said that it opened his eyes to what the ocean really was. It's a conveyor and not an isolator. And so he even went so far as to test a possible theory, even in the future, that the Egyptians could have possibly migrated to South America.
Well, there's pyramids down there, so you never know.
It was called the Ra Project, like the god of the sun. And so he proved it by going from Morocco to Barbados. And so this man he was an adventurer at heart, and he loved to test his theories rather than just simply spout them out.
Yeah, very cool. So this was a good one, Max. Very good suggestion.
And just to put a huge bow on this, of, again, the proper selection. So let's just say there's the family project later this afternoon in the backyard.
There we go.
There are a lot of lessons to be learned here in the fact that use the proper materials, use the proper tools, but also have the proper attitude about what you're about to do. So instead of fighting the process, get on board. And, I think you'll be shocked and surprised at how much easier a project gets when you quit dreading it. I just don't want to pull that shed down into, you know what? Let's knock that baby down and get it out of the way this afternoon.
Let's have an adventure.
And making sure everybody's on board. And the expedition also kind of proved the idea of not getting in another person's lane. The radio people stayed in the radio job. The expedition people, the captain was the captain. There was no mutiny. So not having mutinies on your job sites is pretty important. In a family project.
It's funny too, because now that you're saying that, Allan, the diciest projects I've ever been on are where the husband and the wife don't agree on something, especially when you're talking about like an interior remodeling project. And halfway through the project, it's like
they're
you
sabotaging
can see
each other.
Right.
Oh yeah, they're sabotaging each other.
Or I don't know. Have you ever experienced this? I've been on projects where, you talk. They're both leaving for work in the morning, and maybe the wife's upstairs getting ready, and the husband comes down. He's like, "Look, I know what we talked about yesterday, but I kind of want you to do this." And then the wife comes down. I know what we talked about yesterday. I want you, and suddenly there's a divided household, and you're like in the middle of it, and that never works, man.
Mm-mm.
It's like
it's gonna go poorly.
Your contractor should not be your therapist.
Yeah, but that's the problem if you're not on the same page. And I think part of that is the contractor's job is to clarify. I mean, in that situation, you have to regroup and say, okay, well, let's make sure we're all on the same page here.
Oh, more than once have I called the clients back in and gone, okay, so the goal today is C.
Right.
Y'all go have a good day. And they'll look at you and go, that wasn't a question.
Yeah.
I'm telling you what we're doing today. Now y'all go to work.
Right, exactly. So, and I have to say, not to toot my own horn, but just watching this documentary and learning about the construction of this raft, In no situation here did they say, and we're going to coat these logs with an oil-based sealer, or we're going to paint these things or whatever, because they let the wood be the wood. Let it breathe. And that's why anytime I build a deck or a fence or anything, I'm all about just leave it alone. Because people are always asking, what should we seal this deck with? Or what should we, what's the best paint to use on the deck? And I'm like, don't use anything. Just let it breathe, and it'll take care of itself. So
kind of makes me think of the idea of not overthinking, and how your attempts at trying to do something that you think are helpful are actually harming you. Like how when lifeguards are taught to resist people who are actually trying to drown the lifeguard as they're trying to rescue them, and so they're clinging and everything, and they think that they're being helpful and everything. But the thing is actually just relax. Let it happen.
Well, they panic. I had to save somebody from drowning once, Allan, and they're flailing around, and it's more or less you're like, just stop moving. Stop. I got you. Just and then you bring them in and everything. So kind of like what you said earlier, Max. Don't resist Mother Nature. Just understand her and go along for the ride. Basically,
you'll be all right.
Yeah, but that was a good one. Very cool. And so, but I would say if you've to recap, too, we're going to keep this open for a while because I really like the idea of the therapy tools and, because we didn't even scratch the surface on some of these on our list. But if you've got some that are important to you and that bring you relaxation and everything, just let us know what they are.
Like Deuce, where he said his after-tool therapy is a bottle of Kessler.
There you go. All right, well, we can't do better than that. Thanks, Deuce. He always closes us out strong. So, all right, well, you've been listening to another dynamic episode of Tool Talk Radio, but it's in the can. So on behalf of my buddy, Allan Gilbreth, and our pal Max over there behind the glass, I'm Joe Thorderson. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.